What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Viall Files Freestyle Edition. I'm your host, Nick, joined by Allie and Amanda. And boy, do we have an amazing episode today. Our guest is none other than my wonderful, perfect, amazing, and splendid girlfriend, Natalie Joy. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are y'all?
Wonderful. We have a jam-packed episode. Probably somewhere we teased that PETA, my former Dancing with the Stars partner, was going to be a guest on this episode. PETA couldn't join us. She had to go to Australia for personal reasons.
So I am the second option.
No, baby. Like, you're always the first option.
Well,
You're always there. And I only wanted to bring that up because I know some people are just like, but you mentioned PETA. PETA will be on. She's excited to come on. But we are happy, thrilled, blessed to have you as well. Also, joining us this episode, I'm really excited about two people. We have the body language expert, Janine Driver, is going to be with us. Janine has been in court for the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. I don't know if she's been there every day, but she has been there many days observing the body language of both Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, maybe some other people, I don't know. It was Natalie a few weeks ago who said, you should get a body language expert on your podcast. And then it was my producer, Shanti, who said, how about we get the body language expert from the person who's in court? I have a great team around me. I'm truly blessed. So she will be joining us to get her thoughts. And then we also have Dr. Kirk Honda with us, a psychologist out of Seattle. We had many of our listeners suggest Dr. Kirk. Last week we had Dr. Darcy with us, and many of you had thoughts on Dr. Darcy. She had a spirited take on many things, it seemed like. And we wanted to bring Dr. Kurt on to, just give us his thoughts on the trial itself. I also wanted to get his thoughts on things Dr. Darcy said. Interestingly enough, I personally understood a lot of the things that she was saying. I think as a host, I wish I would have asked a follow-up question in terms of, I hear what you're saying, but it kind of what would you say to people who might think your takes are a bit, maybe lack empathy for people who either can't afford therapy or et cetera, et cetera. Some people thought that it felt a little victim blaming in terms of the rhetoric she was talking about. And I think it brings up an interesting point. Something I want to talk to Dr. Kurt about is, we talk a lot about accountability on this show of controlling what you can control, right? Dr. Darcy talked a lot about, hey, listen, if we experience trauma at some point in our life, we have to get the therapy and do the work so that we're not basically taking that trauma and passing it on to others. But what does that have to do? Where do you draw the line between, I'm curious how Dr. Kurt holds his patients accountable, right? At the same time, while showing empathy for something they might have experienced, right? How does he deal with trying to enforce and set boundaries with his patients and help them hold themselves accountable while not making them feel like it's their fault for anything they may have experienced or victim blaming? And I think that's something that you see a lot on the internet between, two different kind of groups of people, saying, oh, do the work, and the other people saying, oh, that's victim blaming. Is there a middle ground? Can two things be true at the same time in terms of, yes, you can hold people accountable, but that doesn't necessarily, that doesn't mean in any way that you're blaming them for trauma they might have experienced from someone else. So I think that's an interesting discussion. But before they call in, let's talk about, because this trial, we've all talked about it a lot. Natalie is, I think, watched every minute of the court, of the trial, of the court. And we haven't really discussed since Amber Heard has taken the stand. And now they have 10 weeks off before Johnny Depp's team can cross-examine, which I think a lot of people are anticipating. But since Amber Heard has taken the stand, there's been new information, certainly provided by Amber and her team, that is from at least her side, very graphic and detailed about the alleged abuse that she is claiming Johnny committed on her. And it seems like, from what we are seeing, that a lot of people are struggling to believe Amber still. At the same time, there seems to be a growing sentiment of people who also seem to have a fear of what does it mean if we don't believe Amber Heard? And I think as it relates to, believing victims, and I think there's a lot of conversations around that. But it does seem like we are struggling to, I think as we watch, I'm curious what everyone in this room thinks, but it's like when Natalie and I are watching it, it's like, I think we find ourselves trying to give Amber Heard the benefit of the doubt the same way. Like I think we're trying to objectively watch it because, everyone's talked about how like charming Johnny Depp can be on the stand. And people are also talking about Amber Heard's like demeanor on the stand. And that necessarily doesn't make someone more or less truthful, but it does affect how we perceive them on whether we find them to be trustworthy or not, right? But that, you know what I'm saying? And I think people are struggling with comparing those two things.
Totally. And I also think the fact that we started with Johnny Depp's testimony means that there's like the element of like confirmation bias of looking for information that's already going to prove this opinion that's pre-cemented. And so it's, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about like if she had gone first and shared this kind of testimony, would I have taken his testimony with a much larger grain of salt than I did at first?
I've thought about that too. That must matter on some level. There's also the and I'm curious what you ladies think. Before Amber Heard got on the stand, her team, once again, I think prior to this case even starting, her team tried to get this thrown out. Multiple times.
Which is just standard practice from what I understand.
I guess, yeah. Except it didn't. Johnny Depp's team seemed to want this to go to trial. They fought for it to go to trial. And they fought for it to continue to keep going. And I think the question people are submitting is, it seemed like there's tapes out there of Johnny pleading with Amber to like figure out a different way of doing this. It's like he didn't want to necessarily go to trial, but he knew what it meant. He knew they would both look bad. But it seemed like if forced to, he'd rather have people know all these other terrible things that he said that are in text, that are gross and problematic and arguably abusive towards her verbally. But he seemed to, at least from what he believes, that he would rather all that be out there, but he doesn't want people to think that he is physically abusive towards her. And once again, her team, right before she took the stand, tried to get this thrown out. And does it beg the question of, wouldn't she want an opportunity after Johnny's team laid out all this evidence to suggest that she was the abuser in this situation? And before she came out to say, this happened to me, the very graphic things with wine bottles and accusations of punching and physical altercations, do we care that she didn't want an opportunity to express this? Or maybe that makes sense because as a victim, it would be too hard to talk about that. And people are having conversations about that. What do all of you think about them the Amber's team trying to throw the case out, and does that influence your feelings on things?
I mean, I think they're just doing their job. I mean, I don't think that necessarily means that she's right or wrong. I do agree with her not wanting to, quote unquote, relive any situations by having to explain them thoroughly. But I also think that she is terrified to get cross-examined. When she's trying to explain things that Johnny has done or said, and it's like she gets lost in what she's saying and it doesn't really make sense. So then she'll say, he wasn't making any sense. And she kind of blames it on him being like drunk or blackout, and the story didn't make sense, not the way she was explaining it didn't make sense.
Yeah, she does it a lot, where
does it
she
a lot.
kind of is talking, and it's almost like she gets this thought of, maybe this doesn't make sense. And then her response seems to always be, I don't know, he never made sense.
Well, and even the question, we watched a clip of it when they were asking about the drugs, or I forget what it was exactly.
I think it was MDMA.
Okay. And they're asking, you know, like, what was your involvement in this? Or I don't know.
First they asked, like, did you ever solicit it from Johnny,
Yeah.
I think?
And I felt like she would have seemed so much more trustworthy and honest if she would have been like, absolutely not. Or just give like one statement. But instead it was this whole kind of like, what are you talking about? That would have just been like a surefire, like, it's everywhere.
Yeah, well, she first on the stand said that she never has, nor ever would she ever do this drug with Johnny, because that would be asking for trouble. I think I'm paraphrasing her words, but she essentially said that. And my understanding is later on the stand, she admitted to doing this drug once with Johnny. Now, people can forget.
Yeah, it is hard because you don't want, whether it's, you know, despite like what her diagnosis is, or like, you know, if she is a survivor of abuse, it's like so tricky because it's this fine line of, well, I don't want to pull apart or critique you if it is something that you're like struggling with, or like if this is a side effect of your diagnosis. It's just like very hard.
Everyone has their own, I think, who has been a victim has their own way of getting through it. And as I've been in a IPV relationship myself, and I remember every single detail of every physical altercation we've ever had. Like, and I feel like when Amber gets talking about it, she will say like, he slapped me across the face and then I turned to him and then I was looking at the carpet, and it's like, well, how did that happen? That doesn't make any sense. Like, you're explaining things that just don't correlate with how it would actually happen. And I think that's where she loses me. But then again, everyone kind of remembers things differently, I guess.
Do you guys like to shop and get money back at the same time? Everyone just say yes.
Dream come true.
Racketon is the smartest way to shop and save. Get and earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. You can earn cash back at stores in every single category like fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, subscription services, and so much more. Membership is free, and it's really easy to sign up. Racketon deposits your cash back directly into PayPal account, or they can send you a check.
And Racketon has over 15 million members who are like consistently saving. So it's really, you just like add this into your normal everyday shopping, and then you never know, like you'll just be basically earning back the money that you're already spending. And it's not like it's going to accrue into like points and then you have to like use your points for certain things. Like, it's just cash back, again, either in your PayPal or in a check. Because I feel like there's some websites that advertise this and then it's like your points can be redeemed for X, Y, and Z. No, this is just money.
It sounds too good to be true.
I know. Okay, so the other day I was online and I was shopping for a bunch of stuff for my sister's bachelorette party. And, you know, things add up, and I always feel conscious about that because you have to split it with the rest of the group. You never want to like spend too much money. And it was so nice for my little bachelorette budget because I entered in exactly what I bought, and then I entered in the cash back we were getting, and I was like, guys, look, it's basically free. Don't worry about it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's really stunning.
Start all your shopping trips at Racketon.com or get the Racketon app to start saving today. That's Rakuten.com. It's a no-brainer. Hey, my student loan friends out there. Student loans, they're a bugaboo, but how about we pay less for our student loans? Earnest is helping a lot of people pay down their student loans faster and easier. Federal student loan payments are on hold, but with rates this low, now is the time to refinance. So yeah, you're like, get ahead of it. And with the monies you can save, maybe you want to take a trip, you can buy stuff, some new furniture, invest, whatever you want to do. It's your money. Earnest was voted best student loan refinancing overall by NerdWallet. And NerdWallet, they don't mess around. Like, they do the work. It's their whole business model. Earnest has some of the lowest rates, flexible payments, and in-house team ready to help. Earnest will help you change your rate, get you a lower monthly payment, and you never pay fees, not even late fees. By refinancing, you can reduce your loan payment, save money, or combine multiple loans into one simple payment. Now that's easy. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of that stuff. They just make your whole life easier when it comes to student loans. So whether you want to pay less, get a better rate, or just consolidate everything, Earnest is there to help. With Earnest, it only takes 2 minutes to see what your new rate could be, and there is no credit impact. And right now, Earnest is offering our listeners $100 cash bonus, so they're even giving you money back. Refinancing your student loan debt at earnest.com/VIALL. Not all available in all states. Once again, you get a $100 cash bonus when you visit earnest.com/VIALL to refinance your student loan. Visit earnest.com/VIALL for more details. Not available in all states. Terms and conditions apply. Earnest student loan refinancing made by Earnest Operations LLC, NMLS, pound 1204917, California Financing Law, license number 6054788, 535 Mission Street, San Francisco, California 94105. Visit earnest.com/licenses for full list of licenses. That's why I'm really curious to have Janine, the body language expert, on, because as someone who like has an unpleasant like resting face at times,
Same.
you know, like I'm very like cautious and reluctant to say the person who looks the most truthful or the most charming person is the one telling the truth. I think we are very quick to like think that we are body language experts.
Mm-hmm.
And start deciding we know who's telling the truth based off things that we see. And I'm really curious about that because like Johnny Depp is coming across as more likable and more charming than Amber Heard, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's truthful and she's not. I think but when it comes to the stuff, the evidence we're seeing, I mean, the big thing I'm struggling with, and I know you talked about this, Natalie, too, is just like the physical evidence that has been presented to us, I suppose, like the tapes of her admitting to hitting him and things like that. And there doesn't seem to be the equivalent because she has talked about some incredibly graphic accusations towards Johnny Depp. And she's talked about witnesses being there.
She also, her doctor, when her doctor was on the stand, when she was being cross-examined, I don't remember the exact dialogue, but basically when Amber was disclosing the sexual violence to either her therapist at the time or to this doctor, she was calling it just like angry sex. Like, we were having angry sex. And then this doctor who was on the stand was like, well, you know, that is sexual violence, like if you didn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like she kind of maybe that light bulb went off in her head as like, oh.
Which is very common. Like, I feel like that happens a lot with women.
That it's angry sex.
Well, no, of like, sometimes you don't realize, like, because of like experiences I've had and then talking to my friends about them, like I had a girlfriend in college who was like, oh, I didn't realize that was like non-consensual sex until you told me about yours. Like, it's like sometimes it's like you need someone else to point it out to you. I don't know. Just playing devil's advocate.
No, I know totally what you mean.
That
Like,
makes sense.
yeah, like after the fact, it's not until you're recounting it and like recontextualizing it that you're like, wait, what? Because I do think, it's so complicated because I'm sure some people have very different experiences than this. But I think for some situations, especially ones where it's like more of, it's less like physically manipulative and more like emotionally manipulative as well. Like there is the experience of, in your mindset at the time, is kind of trying to go along with it or trying to like make sense of it and being like, and especially if this is someone that you trust or someone or like in any capacity, you're not necessarily primed to see them as a perpetrator of violence. But then when you like pause or out of that given context where this person is not in front of you anymore, you're like, wait, that was really messed up.
Yeah, sometimes that light bulb will go off.
There
like
has been some footage of her saying that like when they were in these fights, to like get him to not leave, she would like try to have sex with him.
Yeah, and isn't that also with the histrionic personality disorder? Doesn't that align with like a symptom of that?
Yeah.
So it is, and I think the most interesting part again is it's Johnny's doctor who said she has this, and she is demonstrating. Again, we're not doctors, so we can't sit there and diagnose. But what we're learning about what it means to have these disorders, and people are saying, "Well, she's doing this." X, Y, and Z, you know, it's weird because like some people are trying to like they might defend her by saying, well, yeah, but she doesn't mean she's lying. It means she's just demonstrating these behaviors. But then it's her doctor who's saying she doesn't have this diagnosis. She has PTSD, but PTSD, again, I'm not an expert, but I don't think having PTSD means you are more performative. That's being performative is a symptom of these mental disorders. And
yeah,
so
I've never heard of performative with PTSD.
Yeah, I don't know, but specifically with these personality disorders, that would be an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, we have to have empathy for her because she might have this disorder, but it's her lawyer saying, or her doctor saying, no, she doesn't though. So then why is she being, why then what's the explanation of her coming across this way on the stand? Did you get the photograph of the cocaine on the?
Oh yeah. It was like the morning after he had been like partying, doing drugs all night, and she like comes down in the morning, and she took a photo of the breakfast table, and there was like 4 lines of Coke and a shot glass full. And I looked at Nick and I was like, this is so perfectly placed. If he was like the partier and the like doing drugs all night, he wouldn't be leaving 4 lines of Coke and a shot glass.
No.
Like he would have done them all. It would be
I think like her
mess.
purse is there. I mean, it looks like a really nice staged Instagram photo.
Yeah, it does.
You
like
know,
aesthetically pleasing drugs.
And it's just like there's just, I guess, you know,
anyone who's ever hosted a pregame knows like it does not look perfect the next morning.
Yeah. And it's just more like, and before we get to Dr. Kirk, it just seems like also, you know, the Johnny Depp that we're hearing a lot of these tapes, right? And interestingly enough, a lot of these tapes were recorded by Amber, not Johnny, which I find to be so bizarre because we're listening to these tapes, if I'm understanding it correctly, and I think we're still having more empathy for Johnny, and we're kind of like, what the fuck? Like she's acknowledging hitting him. She's, you know, saying, oh, no one's going to believe you because you're a man type of stuff. You know, a lot of Johnny Depp pleading with her, a lot of Johnny Depp saying, you can't hit me. I'm going to remove myself from the situation. Like the stuff, at least that we're hearing on tape, it sounds like really bad for her and makes us like have more empathy for Johnny Depp, right? And so the Johnny Depp I think we saw on the stand seems to also match the person we're hearing on these tapes, this kind of this energy. And the Amber we're hearing on these tapes and the Amber we're seeing on the stand also doesn't seem to line up. Like it just, there's just a lot of like, some different Ambers we're seeing. We saw these recordings of her doing testimony like years ago, talking about the same events with different versions of the story. And then also I thought was more interesting, just a completely different energy from her. There was an energy of her kind of snickering and being aggressive. And on the stand, she's more demure and like emotionally affected by that. I don't know if that means anything, but it's just, I think when people watch it, we're just like, this is not what I've been told on how to believe and when I am told how I can believe someone.
Yeah.
Right?
And I also think so many people like have just like a sense. I think for me, like any doubts I have towards her claims come from like just like this weird sense that she's being dishonest, and I can't quite put my finger on it. And I think maybe that's a shared sentiment. And then we have people trying to like point to things that kind of like prove that, and everybody picks like their own thing that's like, oh, that for me is the thing that confirms this like intuition. And it's like on one hand that feels like, oh, very unsubstantiated, that it would be like just the vibes. But then also when you think about like what is trial by jury if not like people using their own like sense of character and intuition, whether like to decide whether or not this person is guilty. Crazy.
Let's get to Dr. Kirk. Dr. Kirk, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We had the chance to meet in person over the weekend in Seattle.
We did. I was standing next to a famous person and someone recognized you, and I felt like I was basking in someone's fame. You know, in Seattle, we don't get a lot of famous people, so it was nice to see you.
Well, it was great meeting with you, and I had a lot of people from my audience mention you and suggest that we have you on the podcast, so we are very happy to have you. Last week we had Dr. Darcy on, who talked a lot about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, and she, gave a very spirited point of view on therapy, which raised some conversations around accountability versus the risk of sounding like we're victim blaming, so to speak. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that episode, but it seemed like I understood a lot of what Dr. Darcy was saying in terms of accountability and how our past trauma can affect us in our lives going forward, especially if we don't address them. And it is up to us to do the work. I get all that. I'm fine. Like, I'm a big believer in holding ourselves accountable. But I'm curious, from your point of view as a doctor, as you work with patients, this must come up a lot with you, right? In terms of how, as a therapist, do you try to simultaneously convey this message of you really need to do the work because it can affect you versus not making your patients feel like it's their fault for not addressing the trauma? And I'm assuming while you're working with your patients, there are these moments where you might have to push a little bit to try to hold them accountable. And how do you kind of massage that in terms of conveying that message? Because it seems to be, I'm seeing this kind of sentiment on the internet a lot more and more, where there seems to be like one group of people saying, do the work, hold yourself accountable. It's up to you to get therapy, get the help you need. And another group of people saying, whoa, stop blaming victims. It's not their fault, et cetera, et cetera. And, I'm always been a big believer that two things can be true at the same time, even though it seems like a lot of people in the world often forget that these days. I'm really curious about what your thoughts on this topic are, and then we'll get a little bit into the Johnny Depp, Amber Heard trial of it all.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that when people have good information and access, which is a problem even in the United States, but especially outside the United States and in certain countries, that people will avail themselves of the service. So, however, when you provide a lot of misinformation about what therapy is, or about mental health, or even stigmatizing language around conditions like personality disorders, then people feel afraid of mental health because they're getting this message that they're going to be judged, or it's not going to work, or it is all their fault or something. And so, you don't have to convince people once they have the right information, because they will see the path ahead and go, that looks like a good path. But when you muddy the waters with, like I said, misinformation and lack of access, then they don't avail themselves of it. So to say that we have to hold people accountable is, I think it implies that somehow people are choosing not to get healed. They're choosing not to have a service that will help them. We have other fields like the medicine field where people generally, they still will avoid it sometimes, but they're generally more likely to go get help. If they break their arm, they're more likely to go to the ER. They're not going to stay home. But why is that? Well, it's because we have good information out there and we don't stigmatize it. And insurance often covers that sort of service. So that's my short answer to that.
Interesting. And so what do you do? Like, what are some, for people out there who are wondering if they're in kind of toxic relationships, right? Or afraid they might be in abusive relationships, what advice do you have for them? Obviously, like, we want to break the stigma with therapy. We try to do that as well. But what would you say to someone on the street where you hear, like, maybe you're overhearing a conversation in terms of trying to encourage them to get the help that they need? Obviously cost matters, but let's assume there's someone who has insurance and their insurance covers therapy. What are some big obstacles that you find people, other than, say, cost, of trying to get the help that they need versus, convincing themselves that they need to fight for this relationship, or they still want to, like, give their partner the benefit of the doubt, et cetera, like all the reasons we maybe see people stay in unhealthy situations?
Yeah, another good question. So what I might say, if someone was in a combative relationship and they seemed like they had access, and they also seemed like they were resisting the idea of going to therapy. What I would say to them is, I guess, the following. I would say, I'm sorry for interrupting. I don't know who you are, but I'm just going to yammer at you for a second. So that as a couples therapist, I have worked with highly combative couples, and I try to provide a space where people can talk about their experience. I don't judge them. Even if someone is being abusive, I will work with them. I find that when people are given a chance to get to know their attachment injuries and the messages that they internalize from their parents in terms of what is acceptable behavior towards your loved ones, then we do see improvements over time. It can be hard work, and it can take time, and you have to put in the work, but there's so much, good to that. There's so much that can be gained. You can, I see that you're struggling with love. You love this person and you want to be with them, but there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to be with them, and you're frustrated, and you've tried so many things without therapy to try to fix it, but come to a specialist. There are many of us, and you can see gains. Not always, but often. Let's just talk about Johnny and Amber. You wanted to talk about that eventually, right?
Yeah. Let's just
cut to the chase.
So,
let's just use it as an example. Yeah.
So for who knows, and I can't diagnose from afar. I'm only seeing what is being presented. It could be quite distorted, and who knows. And I know enough about humans to know that they all have deep, rich stories. But they have disclosed themselves that they both come from pretty horrific trauma, childhood trauma backgrounds, and that typically will set in motion the beliefs and schemas and defenses that one will call a personality disorder or some spectrum of a personality disorder. And then substance abuse will be used to self-medicate because of the lack of ability to emotionally regulate. And when you're in a relationship, you tend to attract or be attracted to or fall in love with people who also have these kinds of backgrounds. And not always, though. It's certainly not always true. But it looks like that's a fair conceptualization of how they came together and how they feel so deeply in love with each other, because they have, I think, described their relationship as the most combative and the most in love relationship, or at least maybe she was saying that anyway.
I think he's echoed kind of similar sentiments about his deep love for her, while suggesting that he believes she treated him poorly as well. So yeah, I think that sentiment is equal on both sides, to your point.
But yeah, so my whole idea with couples is that they both come to the table with some sort of past relational trauma, and they are accidentally triggering each other at the same time as the other person tries to defend themselves or tries to reach out for love. And the greater the relational trauma is, the more likely your communication is going to be convoluted. Like, your partner comes home from work and they're in a bad mood, and you remember how your father would be distant and would be in a bad mood sometimes, and that would really scare you as a child. And you're having these, feelings of fear and hurt, and instead of stating from that place, you actually will go up to him and say, like, you criticize him, just like, you're always taking your work too seriously, like, that's not really what you're feeling, right? What you're feeling is distance. But if you have never been shown that vulnerability can be rewarded, you attack instead, but it's coming from a good place. Times 1,000, and you spread that out over 10 years or something, and you might have something like Amber and Johnny.
So what are you seeing with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial? Because it seems like there was a lot of toxic or negative behaviors from both of them. And when you are dealing with couples who might come in and sit down and they start talking and saying, well, he did this, she did that, et cetera, how do you try to treat a couple who you're looking at and think, these are two people who have been either abusive or toxic to one another?
Yeah, it's tough, but I've done it before, and I've treated couples that were in worse shape than them before. You'd be surprised how quote unquote toxic a relationship can be and still benefit from couple therapy. It can look impossible, but it's not. And often these couples, for me anyway, I have a great deal of professional satisfaction when I can get them to reduce conflict and increase intimacy. It can take years, like literally 10 years. But given what we're up against about, regarding their relational traumas and the amount of fighting that they've had already, and as you say, you can absolutely be traumatized as an adult relationally, and of course in other ways. How do I work with them is, I guess, a hypothetical sort of roadmap would be, one, we have to eliminate the violence. That's when I work with violent couples, that's number one. So we don't work on intimacy. We don't even necessarily work on reduction of conflict. We work on essentially separation techniques, and we set ground rules around that. So for example, Amber won't reportedly let Johnny separate. And although Johnny's separation might not be helpful in the end to help resolve the issue, it does eliminate the possibility of violence happening. And so we would talk with the Ambers in the room and say, by rule, you have to let him go. In fact, it's probably a good thing. I would instruct the Johnnies in my room to say, turn around and say, I will be back. Because that's the thing I don't know if she has borderline, but if she does, they pursue. And to walk away from someone with borderline is deeply, deeply painful to them. I mean, they go on a full panic attack PTSD reaction. It's no joke. It's not a choice that they have to, it's really hard for them not to see it that way and to not pursue out of desperation. And so the Johnnies of the world can help by saying, I'm not abandoning you. I'm just taking 30 minutes, but I'll be back. And then, that can really often mitigate it. So that'd be one. And then two, we would start talking about their attachment injuries and how that creates wounds, which creates triggers, which they're both doing to each other. And through awareness about that, which can take a long time, they can modify their behavior and their ways of perceiving the other person, their own emotional regulation. That step can take years, by the way, particularly with a couple like this. Parallel to that, we would be addressing, at the very least, Johnny Depp's addiction, and I would probably require that he was in some sort of treatment program, even if it was just once a month for check-ins and that kind of thing. And then I always know that I've reached the midpoint of therapy when a couple sits down on my couch and they're like, you know what? We haven't had a fight this week. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that would be a roadmap.
I'm curious. So Johnny Depp hired a doctor, a therapist, Amber Heard's team hired a doctor and a therapist. I feel like this happens in the court of law often, where they have two opposing doctors who have two opposing points of view. But to summarize, if I'm understanding correctly, is Johnny Depp's doctor diagnosed Amber with histrionic and borderline personality disorder, and also suggested at the same time that she saw no signs of PTSD, while Amber Heard's doctor said literally the opposite, where she saw signs of PTSD, but she didn't see signs of these personality disorders. I guess my question to you is, one, is if you have borderline or histrionic personality disorder, doesn't that mean that you have some sort of PTSD, or is that not necessarily the case? And two, as a therapist and a doctor yourself, is it frustrating for you to see, or is it common to have these two doctors have completely different points of view? Because I quite honestly, as like a civilian, as a non-doctor, it almost seems frustrating, right? Like, you guys are the doctors. There should be some sort of standard. And why are we getting very different, quote unquote, expert diagnosis on this, on the same person? And like, who do you believe? It feels like it discredits both of them at the same time. And I'm curious, like, what do you say, or how does that make you feel as a physician or a therapist, hearing that? Because it must come up a lot.
When you are in these civil cases in particular, it's understood that you have to find what your client wants to find. And if you don't find what you intuit they want to find, and it's all this kind of, and I'm just speaking from my experience, I have no idea about Dr. Hughes or Dr. Curry. I don't have the data before me, but it is weird that they both look at the same person and have essentially the opposite findings. One person found personality disorders and no PTSD, and the other person found no personality disorders, no evidence, and PTSD, and strong evidence for PTSD. So
do you think, sorry to interrupt you, but do
please.
you think that is because, one, Dr. Curry spent only 2 hours with her and Dr. Hughes spent like 25 or something? Does the time that you spend with someone change that?
Yeah. My understanding was Dr. Curry spent 12 hours or something like that. So she couldn't do a forensic evaluation in 2 hours. And from my memory, it was 12 hours.
Okay.
It was less.
But it was
time.
less, yeah.
So for me, when I diagnose people with personality disorders, it takes me months. So the fact that forensic psychology is expected to evaluate personality disorders in even 30 hours, frankly, is, especially when they're doing all this other testing, is just not, I wouldn't be confident, because personality disorders, it's so complicated. You have to get inside people's experience deeply. You have to understand their reactivity in a number of different contexts. And even then, it's kind of opinion. That's the other thing, is that, and they state it as opinion, but I think it comes across as like kind of like medical fact. But diagnosing it's an art form. So to claim that it's hard science, and to stand, in front of a courtroom and claim that somehow she does not have a personality disorder, or she does have a personality, because for me, if they asked me to come on the stand, I'd be like, and they asked me, I'd be like, I don't know. You could make a case for a personality disorder. You can make a case she doesn't. And no one would want to hire me because of that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We were discussing this before you came on, is that like some of what, just everyone who's watching it, are a lot of the comments when it comes to Amber Heard is she seems to be theatrical or performative, kind of just fake. And then we remember the diagnosis from Johnny Depp's doctor saying, well, if she's histrionic or borderline personality, that might explain why she's coming across that way. And so it's kind of like, now to your point, like we were provided this kind of all this information, and then we try to interpret what that means as we watch her. I'm curious, as you watch her on the stand, as someone who's has a background in this, what do you make of her on the stand? I know you can't necessarily diagnose her because you haven't worked with her, but we're seeing this information and we're trying to extrapolate that and say, okay, well, if she has this diagnosis, then maybe that means her quote unquote fakeness or her performative nature or theatrics would be explained by that. But if she is not, then is she just reading as fake?
On one hand, she is in a very weird position. I mean, just imagine that you have to convince the jury and the world of your narrative. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. You could imagine someone erroneously thinking they have to amp up their emotional expression as a way of somehow being more convincing. She's an actor, but she doesn't have a director there telling her what to do. So it's who knows what the real Amber Heard is. We can't look at her behavior in the courtroom as necessarily a representative of her behavior overall. But what I see are two greatly suffering individuals, regardless of what the diagnosis is, and regardless of who's to blame mostly, which we might not ever know, for the abuse that they both have committed. I see two people that are deeply in pain. I mean, the amount of drug abuse that Johnny Depp has seemingly, done tells me that he is in just so much pain. And obviously some of it's from Amber, but it goes way back, right? And when I watch the trial, occasionally I just think, oh, because I've treated people like this and I've heard their stories, and they'll tell me just how miserable they are. And it's easy to look at, I think maybe particularly Amber Heard, the way that she holds herself in public, to think that like she's, I don't know, people will say that she's smug or, some sort of master manipulator or something. It could be true, but it's not usually the case. Usually all of this that we've heard and all the stuff we've seen it's born from just tremendous pain. And somehow because they're famous and rich and beautiful, it gives people some sense of license to attack them and ridicule them and bully them, which I just don't. I feel sad for them mostly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, we're all kind of coming to this conclusion, which is one thing we do know is that just a messy, sad situation. And
I mean, sorry to be
no
a
one's
bummer.
Gonna win. Say that again.
Sorry to be a bummer, but
I mean, I think that's.
But it's true.
That's the reality.
That is true.
Both of them are at fault. And
Yeah.
I do think that is something that everyone can agree on, is that they both were extremely toxic and extremely abusive, whether it was physical, emotional, or mental, verbal, whatever, to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that note, just side note, because I did watch the episode with Dr. Darcy, and I don't know if you're still, and we did talk about this in person the other day, Nick. There is a thing called mutual abuse. So I want to vindicate you because you said
well, it was a couple
co-abuse,
weeks ago. I threw out the word, and a couple of our listeners who said they're studying to be a therapist, or I don't know, or suggested I was way off base by suggesting the term, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm way wrong there. And
no, that's in the clinical literature. There's lots of research on what they call bidirectional intimate partner violence. The reason why we want to be cautious when we are, assessing or conceptualizing a couple this way is we might be inadvertently blaming a victim, including with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So we want to make, quite certain that there isn't one person that overall is being abused and that victim is just fighting back. So, and that can look from a distance as mutual abuse, but in reality, you have a victim who's just occasionally exploding or trying to defend themselves.
yeah,
In my field, I don't have to necessarily make that determination because, I try to get a sense of some general percentage if that's happening, but I don't care who's to blame. The whole thing needs to stop. All the intimidation and all the demands and all the punishments and all the violence, that's all got to stop. And I might kind of give some language like, I think you're doing it a little less, but that also has to stop. But I'm really just saying to the two of them, like, all of this has to end. And here's this new model that we're going to adopt. And so in the end, I might not ever know, especially scientifically, who was more to blame, but it didn't matter.
yeah. I think that's a great place to wrap it up too, because I think we're, maybe it's just, I don't know how to we're trying to talk about this trial, and I think most people are trying to figure out, quote, who is to blame, right? And even in any type of relationship, when we are in a fight of any time, I think our it's almost like our nature or our reaction is to try to win a fight. It's not my fault, you started it, et cetera, et cetera. And to your point, it's more about stopping what's going on, trying to solve the problem rather than winning the fight, not pointing fingers, because at the end of the day, as we are responding to this, we do seem to spend a lot of time trying to figure out who is to blame rather than solving the problem itself.
Yeah. And as a trained marriage and family therapist myself, a big part of our philosophy is called systems theory, which involves not trying to find who's to blame necessarily, but trying to find how the system operates to produce how it looks. And you treat the system, you don't try to single someone out and say, you're the problem. Sometimes it's true that there is one person that is the problem in terms of the intimidation. So there's that caveat for sure. But yeah, it is a compulsion that I find, because I react to a lot of reality TV on my YouTube channel. And in the conversations I hear about these couples on like 90 Day Fiance or whatever, there's this compulsion to be like, I hate that person and that person's great. And I always want to help people to not do that, because it reflects a principle or a tendency that doesn't help us in our own relationships, because we're much more prone to believe we're right and the other person's wrong, when it's a more helpful perspective to say that we're both right and we're both wrong and we're both triggering each other.
Dr. Kirk, this has been really helpful and really interesting. I appreciate you taking the time. Can you please let my audience know where they can follow you, listen to you with all the things that you are doing?
I have a podcast and YouTube channel called Psychology in Seattle, and I am reacting to various different things and doing various different deep dives. But I also, because you prompted me kind of to watch the Dr. Darcy episode last week on your show, and I actually did a long, lengthy reaction video to everything that she was saying, and so I'm going to post that.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, so watch out for that on my YouTube channel.
All right. Well, we thank you very much. Appreciate it, and it's been really great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, Dr. Kirk. Janine, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We are so excited to have you. For the people who don't know, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, specifically your expertise as a body language expert. What does that mean? And if I'm understanding correctly, you have been in court at the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Is it every day or some of the days? Or like, how involved have you been, and what role?
Well, first of all, I have been in the courthouse, and
Okay.
I've been virtually in the courtroom with the rest of us.
Okay, so you're watching it virtually.
Which is better, because I'm focused on micro expressions.
Okay.
So for me to be sitting in there and looking at Johnny Depp's back of his head is going to be useless for me.
Interesting. Okay. So we have the same level of data, I guess, to go on. So before we get into what you're observing as regards to the court, I'd love for you to give us just a little background on what does it mean to be a body language expert, and how exact is this science? And just give us a little insight into what you're doing, and then what we can derive from the things that you're observing.
So my background is 18 years with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF. My dad said I'm his daughter who turned her hobbies into a career: drinking, smoking, and shooting. I don't do any of those things half as much as I used to. So at the time, I was one of, I think there were three of us. If you Googled body language experts, was myself, the Alan Pease and his wife, a woman named Patty Wood. Along came a woman named Tanya Ryman. She was on Bill O'Reilly for a little bit. And then that was it. Now, if you Google body language experts, you'll get thousands and thousands. Anyone who took a psychology class or read a book on, or watched a TikTok is now all of a sudden a body language expert.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you for that insight. So as a body language expert, how exact is this science, and how confident, when you are watching people and seeing their body language, are you in your diagnosis? For example, like we just talked to a therapist, Dr. Kirk, who, talked about, as a therapist, he's giving his opinion, he's making observations, and there was just a lot of, I guess you could say, disclaimers in terms of like, hey, as a therapist, I'm observing X, Y, and Z, but, we can't necessarily assume, or I have to make assumptions, he's saying sometimes, as a therapist, to try to diagnose. Reading body language obviously is very different than being a therapist. And I'm just wondering, like how exact is this science, or do you leave room for, hey, it could mean this, but it could also mean this, or do you get pretty confident in specific with your diagnosis?
There is, well, it's not a diagnosis. That would be a therapist. My evaluation, I would say.
Thank you.
So it's all right. So it's not that simple. It's not cut and dry. So body language in and of itself, I think, is not great at detecting deception. You're looking for a baseline. When someone's baseline changes, all it means is there's something they're not telling you. So ask me if I ever cheated on my ex-husband.
Have you ever cheated on your ex-husband?
No. Many people would say, aha, she's a cheater, because a shoulder shrug is uncertainty. She said a definitive answer, no, but then showed uncertainty. Janine's a cheater. No. When I said no, there's a disconnect in my baseline. I shouldn't do an uncertainty shrug, but you just opened a file from a filing drawer, a cabinet drawer that I'm uncomfortable talking about. Maybe my ex-husband cheated on me and I'm called the human lie detector. Maybe my assistant just told me she thinks her significant other is cheating on her. So when you have asked me something and my body language is saying there's something suspicious, we don't know what the catalyst is for that change in that behavior. Do you understand?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's part one. Part two, there's something called 7 universal emotions, and they show up on all of our faces the same way, or pretty much the same way: happiness and sadness and fear and surprise and anger, contempt and disgust. It doesn't matter if you're from the Ukraine or from Russia or from Chicago. They show up in the same way on our faces. And it doesn't matter if you're 3, 13, or 103. So this is a science that it will show me if I do this, it's disgust. If I do this, it's contempt, moral superiority, which we see a lot on the stand, a lot in the courtroom with Amber, this moral superiority. I can tell you with 100% certainty what it is, what emotion it is, but I can't, again, tell you what the catalyst is. I can just tell you there's uncertainty here. Where their eyes move, I can tell you different things. If they look down and they look down left or down right, it's one of two things. They're either an internal dialogue, having a conversation with themselves, or they're processing through emotions. So we don't know, but we certainly know it's one of those two things. They're not visualizing something in that moment. They're either having a conversation like, what else should I say? What should I do next? Or they're processing through emotions. Lastly, I'm trained in something called movement pattern analysis from Chicago out of Columbia College. We move in a pattern that can be analyzed. Both of you have a behavioral fingerprint. Look how you're sitting differently. When you walk into the room, you'll walk in differently. So we have a behavioral fingerprint, much like your thumbprint. And there's about 8 to 9 billion people on the planet. And there are 36 billion different behavioral fingerprints. And so one of my specialties is this movement pattern analysis. And this goes back to World War II. Harvard University's done studies on this, 99% accurate. So this means I can watch you. I have to watch you. I'm profiling right now, both Amber and Johnny, because I have to get 2 hours of footage where I can see their whole body. So I'm going through different videos and interviews they've done over the past decades to get their behavioral fingerprint. And I don't have it yet, but I can certainly see some of the elements in the courtroom with this behavioral fingerprint. We all make 12 moves, all humans on planet Earth, unless you've had a stroke or you're in a wheelchair. And so I'm looking for these 12 movements. As a matter of fact, Johnny Depp's attorney just did one a couple of days ago. I'll chat about it if we have time.
Yeah. What does it mean to cross your legs or cross your arms a lot? Because I do this a lot.
So it could be your baseline. So if you do it a lot at your baseline, it means nothing to me. Crossed arms is the biggest myth in body language. Crossed arms, think about it. We think it's bored, disinterested, defensive. Well, someone forgot to tell all the cops, because when they go to the scene of a crime, they do this. They see a dead body, a pack of cigarettes, a gun. Are they bored, disinterested, and defensive? No, they're using both sides of their brain. So crossed arms uses both your right brain, which is intuitive and takes risks, which controls the left side of your body, and your left brain that likes facts and figures and wants to think about it logic, which controls the right side. So if you cross your arms like that, you're 30% more likely to solve a difficult task or problem, because you're tapping into both sides of your brain.
That makes way more sense.
You cracked the code.
You made me feel so seen.
Cracked the code.
Janine, because I'm always like, why do I do this? But I often use, I use both sides of my brain a lot in terms of, I'm going to use this a lot on my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get into what you have observed and what you can tell us about both Johnny and Amber as it relates to their testimony and what you're seeing. I know you're kind of in the middle of your evaluation, but what light can you shed on what you've been studying?
There's something called Miller's Law. And Miller's Law is that when people are telling you something, they actually will often tell you the truth. And so when Amber is on the stand, this is something else I'm trained in. It's called statement analysis. Words are way more accurate to detect deception in body language, because the truth is in the words. So when Amber says things like, she said, this is the toughest thing I've ever experienced in my life, being in this courtroom, seeing people, my ex-husband, people I knew and people I thought I knew talking about me. This is the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. Okay, most battered women and battered men who survive going through the courtroom is not the hardest thing. Maybe losing a loved one or having your kids see you be abused or your parents see you be abused. So I believe, in fact, this is the hardest thing she's probably gone through in her life. When she says, I wish I could give you, tell you the story step by step, but I can't. It comes to me in chunks. I wish I could tell you step by step. Well, Truthful people can tell you step by step. I'm a battered woman survivor. I had a boyfriend that left me for dead, legit. And I can tell you step by step from when I walked into his house to what happened next, to what he did next, all the way till I was in the driveway when he pushed the button and his garage door is slowly going down. And just before he turns his back and walks away, he said, I hope you effing die out there. Like, I can tell you step by step. So the fact she says, I wish I could tell you, I believe that. I believe she does wish it. I believe that she's lying, in my expert opinion. She's using combinations, stuff from movies, stuff from what, her former assistant told her, where she was brutally attacked, and making up a whole bunch of stuff. So it makes sense. By the way, liars can tell the story backwards. Liars, tell me about a time you experienced some grief or some type of trauma, and you tell me the story, this. You can also tell me backwards with absolute certainty and clarity. It might take you a hot second, but the order will be correct. Liars can't tell us backwards what happened.
Oh, so liars can't. I thought, yeah.
No, so I may have said that wrong. Truthful people can.
Truthful people can tell it backwards. Yes.
Yeah. So Miller's law is a couple things. So this Miller's law is this: we tell people the truth. So like Jean-Benet Ramsey's mother said, fine, if I killed the child, tell me steps 1 through 10, how I did it. Now, I'm not saying she did it, but if we can take out so we can take out if, and in the statement is, I killed the child. This is suspicious to me. So it's like if I dated you guys and I said, I just want to let you know, I'm not the kind of person who would cheat on you. I can't take out the word not, it's in the middle. But I know you think I'm the kind of person who would cheat on you. This person, you should be very cautious about dating them. I know you think I could take that away. I'm the kind of person who would cheat on you. Maya Angelou would say, people tell you who they are. You better pay attention when they tell you the first time. So in statement analysis, Amber is giving me lots of information that indicates that she's not being truthful.
Could you give us some more examples of why you think that?
So she does also part of statement analysis. She does start-stop sentences. So when there's a start-stop, she does them all the time. So we were on the couch and I was on the ground and I saw that the rug was dirty and my dog got stung by a bee. Like these start-stop sentences, what they are is if you've ever gotten a scar means a piece of your skin has been removed and the other two pieces are sewn together. When you have a start-stop sentence, it's two parts of the story and something has been removed. So this is that scar that we're picking up on, that what's being removed from her story. I do think her dog was stung by a bee. She's like, stung by a bee, right? I do think Johnny Depp probably had a jar of cocaine, a jar of cocaine. I think these parts where she oversells it, for her, I think this is where the truth actually is. Typically, truthful people convey information and liars try to convince us. But because there's so much deception, in my opinion, my expert opinion, I think that where she's trying to convince us are actually the truthful moments. Like, no, this really did happen. This really did happen. Yeah. She also drops the pronoun. So instead of saying he hit me or I did this, I fell to the ground, the pronoun is dropping. And when we drop the pronoun, we're no longer connected with the story. It's just a story that's hanging out there. And she also changes the tenses. So Susan Smith said, who drowned her 2 kids in the early 90s, I loved my boys. Well, the helicopters are still over her head looking for her boys. She's using past tense. With Amber Heard, we're seeing and hearing both current and past tense. And here's the deal. Because everything is so all over the place, she's not going to become across as believable. And another part of this Miller's law is, if I can't get into your story, if I can't be you yawn, I yawn. We have mirror neurons. Mm-hmm. So when you tell me a story, if Natalie's telling me a story about a time where someone punched her in a bar when she was in college, and she's like, I came out, I did have a couple of cocktails, and this guy came up out of nowhere and just punched me in my face, I'll be transported in that story. And once I am, I'll believe her. But here's the difference. If God forbid this happened to you, Natalie, you would tell me the story from your perspective. When we get Amber Heard on the trial, on the stand, she's telling us from Johnny's perspective. She's telling us from the abuser's perspective. So she's showing, it's called illustrators, and she's showing us the movements of the attacker. She should be, and Johnny punched me in the head. Think about Johnny Depp.
She should almost be showing like a defensive kind of body language. Interesting.
Yeah, think of Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp said, I was sitting here, I'm like this, my hand is like this, like on the edge, and she's throwing the bottles at me. he is in the perspective, he's in the shoes of the person who's receiving the abuse. She talked about, and Johnny did this and he was speeding me up and I thought I was going to die and he was speeding me up. And I think I let my grip go down, or I think I softened my grip. She went from him to all of a sudden her. And it's a disconnect, and it happens all the time with her. It's these Freudian slips that she does. A study was done at, out of, I wrote it down here, Tilburg University in the Netherlands, about fake crying and real crying. Have you guys watched it? Who do you think was really crying and who do you think was fake crying?
We're not seeing a lot of tears from Amber. So yeah, I think it seems like Amber might be fake crying, at least from my point of view. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree as well. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't.
Because it seems like she's reaching this point of, and maybe it's just like you were saying, the broken sentences, but it's like she's using these pauses either to try and convey emotions or think of her words, which maybe could come across as being like choked up, but then you don't see the tears accompanying it.
We are consumers of reality TV. I don't know if you know this, but it is a fake crying happens on reality TV, and I don't know if you could speak to this, but what I notice is like there's a moment of like a pause, and then the person takes like a breath, and then they start the emotion, because it's like I can almost see it in their brain of like the awareness of I should cry now. And I see this on reality TV a lot. I haven't necessarily seen something as dramatic with Amber, but yeah, it like you can kind of almost see this kind of internal thought of it might be really good to cry, and they like take a breath to kind of rally the energy it's going to take to like show this emotion. I don't know if that
yeah,
what you
or
think.
Take a pause for a photo op, right? With her
Yeah, we saw that too. Yeah.
Let's talk about the crying aspect, because this is another aspect I'm putting together in a PowerPoint. I think if we were to survey everyone that's been watching this trial, there was one particular time in the trial where someone was crying, and it really pulled at our heartstrings. Like it was uncomfortable to be witnessing it. Can you guess what it was?
I'm not aware.
No, tell us.
It's when the audio recording was playing of where Amber came to the hotel and violated the restraining order, and she came and just wanted to hug Johnny, and he has a knife and he wants to like cut himself or stab himself, and she's like, it's a dull knife, don't stab yourself, and you hear Johnny's voice. And while this is happening, Johnny Depp is on the stand at this point when this is playing, and he cries. He cries just a hot second. And in that moment, we're transported into a man who was probably one of the lowest of lows of his life, being played for the world, and he gets like choked up and emotional. And so I'm emotional thinking about it, because we're transported. I don't think that's going to happen for the jury with Amber, because it's so all over the place. Miller's Law means we have to get into the story and feel what that be. I think we've all been in a place where we just felt like it would be better off to just either not be here, or just better off to rewind the story, or just we wish this person never came into our life. Like we've been at the bottom of a difficult situation at some point, heartbroken, and we don't see that with Amber. So when you fake cry, it's going to cause Amber way more harm than good. And we can only remember we have a phone number with 7 numbers. We can only remember the average is 7 pieces of information for 30 minutes. This is why Amber's testimony here is changing from what she said in the UK. And so this is something I'm examining now, the 2 different ones, the 2 different stories. And the more she tells details, she's kind of not making a strategic decision here, because I think Johnny Depp's attorneys in the 2 weeks from now, when they go back, they're going to hammer her. They're going to, all the details she's giving, she's going to lose all credibility. Already, yeah. It's going on TikTok. She was asked on the stand, did you ever try to learn to play the guitar? She said no. And it's going around TikTok of her singing a song and playing a guitar.
Yeah, she said she never played the guitar. And then there's like videos of her singing and playing the guitar quite well, actually.
Yeah, she perjured herself already, which she could go to jail for.
She perjured herself a couple times regarding her saying she's never done MDMA. Is it MDMA? MDMA with Johnny, and then said she did it once. So yeah, there's a lot of
I think, people were asking me this morning, when they prove that she has perjured herself next week or in a couple of weeks when they go back, people were asking me, do I think she'll end up in jail? And I do think that there's a potential of that happening because she's wasting the court's time. Virginia, we're not used to all this celebrity hubbub. She's really wasting the judge's time. And if she perjures herself and it's proven next week, which we all know that she's perjured herself, if it's proven in court in a big way, I wouldn't be surprised if the judge does give her some time in jail, because if she doesn't, we're sending the wrong message to people who are watching around our country that, you can perjure yourself. It's not a big deal. It's not like you're going to go to jail or anything. It's going to do a huge disservice to our criminal justice system if she doesn't get any time, even at night, behind bars.
Question for you. Obviously they are actors. And they've been told by their counsel that everyone's watching them, the jurors are watching you. So, write down stuff or be aware of what you look like. Is that something that you had to take into consideration when doing this, that they are actors and their responses could potentially just be them acting, or in this situation, you think they're 100% real? Or
like to your point, like they even got coached to do a certain thing by their counsel.
Well, they're definitely... First of all, they're definitely both. Someone's definitely trying to coach them. Johnny Depp, one of the reasons he didn't like 21 Jump Street is because he didn't like being pushed into being a product of someone else. If someone's coaching Johnny, I don't know how much coaching. I feel like the real Johnny's hitting the stand. Amber's being coached for sure. I mean, she's wearing the same outfits as Johnny. She's looking at the jury. I think it's going to backfire on her because there's so much mumbo jumbo. They're not going to relate. I doubt the jury's crying hearing her stories. What I do to get a baseline is I go back and I watch interviews where they're just themselves, where they're on like David Letterman or The Tonight Show or Oprah or Ellen, where they're just being them and not acting. But then again, you don't really know. And I'm watching their baseline of how they normally behave, what's their tone, their pitch, who they are. And Amber has changed her baseline where Johnny's is 100% consistent. It's the same exact Johnny in all of those interviews that we see in the courtroom. He's a little smug. I mean, he's definitely verbally abusive. We've heard that in court from different things that he said. That's not what this case is about, though. And Johnny touches his face a lot. This is part of his baseline. He'll laugh at an inappropriate time. He does this. It's incongruent humor, we call it. And he does that when he talks about the abuse his mother did to him. He talked about it when he is talking about the abuse Amber has done. He'll laugh at these spots. This is alleviating negative feeling, negative emotions. And it can be provocative, which we see when Amber's on the stand and she says, like, I think at one point she said, and Johnny said I was the biggest mistake of his life, or that he wished he never met me, something like that. And he's like, he's looking down, he's like, that one's right. That one's right.
Yeah, you see him responding, like not to her, but like there was a part where like she said, and he whipped out his penis, and there's a shot of Johnny like shocked, like it was almost like
twice we're talking about his penis.
Like, well, the reaction was like, how did she come up with it? Like, to me, it read like almost he was hearing this for the first time.
No, someone else had mentioned it prior it had been a question before that he was peeing in the living room or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it had been asked.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like outside in the foyer, they had asked his bodyguard, when you picked up Johnny, he was peeing in the foyer, right? And the bodyguard is like, I think he's from Scotland. It's like, no. And his lawyer goes, Amber Heard's lawyer goes, so you didn't see Johnny Depp with his penis out in the foyer peeing? And he goes, I think I remember if I saw Mr. Depp's penis. I think I remember. And they're like, objection. So it's the second time they're talking about Johnny Depp's penis. Can't you just say pee? We get where it's coming out. Like, we don't need to have an anatomy lesson,
I just think I have been watching this trial as well. And anytime that, obviously, I don't know if you noticed, Johnny doesn't look at Amber. He looks down, he looks this way, he looks at his lawyer, but he does not ever look at Amber. But when she's speaking and she says something kind of radical, or he looks at his lawyer like, can you believe she just like that again? Or can you believe she just said that? And to me, I find that more believable than kind of the reactions that Amber was having.
Yes, 100%. So this is a strategy for sure. So I don't know if you've ever been in the company of someone who doesn't like you, or you walk out of you meet some people and you're like, oh, that one didn't like me. And you're like, no, he liked you. And you're like, the reason you feel that way is because they didn't look at you.
Mm-hmm.
And so Johnny right out of the gate is not looking at her, which is very strategic. He's saying, I have no respect for this person in front of me. And think about the other difference here with their words. What did Johnny call Amber
When
he testified?
Misheard.
Yeah.
What does Amber call him?
Johnny. Yeah.
Johnny. So I'm getting a lot of battered women that are writing to me on through my TikTok and through different social media saying, I just want to let you know, I testified in court. My husband shot me with a gun. My ex-husband, I would have never in court called him by his first name. He's nothing.
Yeah.
Like I would never. And so lots of women are writing to me saying the fact she calls him Johnny. And not only that, she said he was the love of her life and then said he still is. There is no survivor of domestic abuse who's going to say that person is still the love of my life. They'll say something like Johnny said, which is, she didn't exist. You never existed. The person I loved never existed. You weren't real.
Yeah. You talked a lot about that, especially all the just remembering everything, or just
I pointed that out earlier, how I was in a intimate partner violence relationship, and anytime I've ever asked about it, I can recall step by step how the fight started, what transpired, and how it ended. And I'm just blown away by how Amber's just doesn't make sense. She's not like, she's on the ground and then she's on her back and then she's slapping him across. Like, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I find that
she's like, he's grabbing my hair, but she's like grabbing his arm.
Yeah.
So these are called illustrators. And first of all, I'm so sorry that you're a survivor of this abuse. I'm glad that you've lived through it. And I'm sorry that happened. But she's like looking at her arm, but saying it's her hair. And it's, again, they can't put themselves in the story. So you said that Natalie, you said you can remember what happened before, what happened on the actual altercation, and then what happened after. So when we're telling a story, there should be about 20 to 30% up front. So we'll average it out 25%, the before. Then the actual incident should be 50% of you talking. Then there should be an after story about 10 to 15%. Okay. So when people are lying, they'll often, like Jussie Smollett, they'll stage a hate crime in Chicago, and even R. Kelly. So they'll often stack the deck really high up front because these things are truthful. All this happened. I did this, and I was going to get a sandwich over at, over our salad or in Chicago, and it was cold, and I was going to sandwich over at this, whatever it was. I forget the someplace Subway. All these things are truthful, and so they'll stack the deck with all this truthful stuff, and then the incident will be such a short amount of time.
Fascinating.
I mean,
stuff.
watch someone who's attacked by a bear and listen to their story. By the way, hand gestures happen up to 5 seconds before thought. So there's 4 stages of how we communicate. I say, think like a tree. So the roots of the tree are your intention or what you believe. The trunk of the tree is body language. The branches are thought. And then the leaves are words. This means body language is happening up to 5 seconds before thought. So we know how Amber's feeling before Amber knows how she's feeling. And what we're looking for, because this happens, and this is also on my to-do list, is when she's talking about the attacks, I'll be slowing it down. And the gestures, whatever gestures, minimal amount of gestures she's using, should happen a half a second before the word. Let's do a test right now. Both of you say call me with a hand gesture and with your words. How would you say call me with a hand gesture and your words? Okay.
Just say call me.
Did you see what happened? Your hand gesture came up first.
Yeah.
Now I want you to do the hand gesture when you say me. I want you to say call me.
Call me.
Call me.
Do it again. Call me.
Call me.
Call me.
Me.
One more time. You can't even do it.
Me.
Does that feel weird?
Yeah. It's weird.
It also looks weird. Both of you go like this. Go, check, please.
Check, please.
Check, please.
Yeah, that's weird.
It doesn't
You
work.
can't even do
natural.
it. You're doing it correctly. You can't do it.
Yeah,
so I'll be watching, I'll be slowing it down and seeing, does her gestures come a half a second before? And I have a funny feeling the answer is going to be no. And Spencer Kelly over at Colgate University did a study, guys. And here's what he found out. If I said, do you have a peanut butter and jelly on my socks, please? Your brain is like this, peanut butter and jelly socks. What? It does like this brain hiccup. And what he found out is when our body language doesn't match what I'm saying, there's a brain hiccup. So when she is talking about being beaten and punched and thrown, but she is showing up as the aggressor, the jury's brain is going to say, wait a minute, I think she's asking for a peanut butter and jelly on her socks. They're going to say there's something weird here. They can't put their finger on it, but they're just not going to believe her, in my opinion.
Fascinating
So cool.
stuff. We really, really appreciate you taking the time, Janine, and look forward to getting more of your insights as you continue to study this trial. Can you please let our audience know where they can find you and get more of the information you're putting out there?
Yeah, my TikTok's going crazy right now. So I'm the best version of me when I'm serving others. So they'll often ask me to promote. I've written a couple books. I don't care about any of that. You can get that stuff at the library where you can get free information where I'm analyzing this case. Today, I'm going to do about 5 more videos. I'm doing them around the clock. I started at 7 o'clock this morning. My TikTok page is Body Language Institute. And my website is JanineDriver.com, JANINE, driver.com. And if I can help serve you in any way, I'm here to help. Let me know. Shoot me a message or an email, either through TikTok or over on my website.
Janine, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me,
All
guys.
right, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Wow.
Okay, so interesting.
Very interesting. But it all made a lot of sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So she definitely thinks Amber Heard is
The aggressor.
the aggressor. And being more untruthful. And it was interesting how, she didn't talk too much about like what she saw from Johnny, other than that one moment of him putting himself in the place of when he was talking about the abuse he received. He was talking from his point of view. That one part. That's really interesting. I wanted to close with just a conversation that we kind of opened up with like, as women who have talked about being victims themselves, and there's a lot of conversation about what is this trial going to mean for the landscape when it comes to abuse and believing people. I mean, how does it make you guys feel, or do you have any fear, or do you feel like you're taking this case at face value? Because it does seem like there are some people out there, there's this fear of what is it, like I have to believe Amber because we want to believe women and we want to believe the women who are victims of abuse. Like, how does that resonate with you, or do you see it differently, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's where it becomes difficult. I think just as a woman, you want to believe any person who says they've been victimized before, especially as a victim yourself. You don't ever want to think that it's possible that someone would lie about that, because you know yourself how traumatic and scarring it is to go through something like that. So to think that someone would lie about it is a very hard thing to grasp, for me especially. So I do feel this sense of needing to believe her, because I don't want to believe that she would lie about this. But with this particular situation, I have a hard time believing her because it just seems so inconsistent, and it makes it scary for other women to want to feel like they can come forward and they can talk about their situation, because this trial is so publicized and it's so large and she's saying such terrible things that if she can get up there and lie about these things, then how are we supposed to be trusted? And that's where it becomes difficult.
And I thought it was very interesting, like some of the stuff Janine was saying too, like the recounting and like the hand gestures and what you would do, like, and you talked about this too, like you can say everything that happened, you can tell all the details. Like if I was ever like recounting it, I could like I can feel it, like I can feel my body and I can feel like where his hands were on mine, and I would demonstrate it on myself. And also like her saying like the prep of the story versus like when it happens, like it doesn't matter how long the abuse, whether it be, emotional, sexual, physical, whatever, like time stops in those moments. So it feels like forever. And that's where you would like give all the details. So it's like, I couldn't put my finger on what wasn't adding up. And then it's like moments like that of like, yeah, I guess it can be different for everyone, but in terms of recounting, it was interesting to hear Janine's feedback because I'm like, yeah, that's not how I would recount. I mean, I don't know.
But then you also don't want to, because you know every situation's different. You know
Totally.
every person handles something in a different way than you do. So that's, you like don't want to
Well, and
discredit
that's
her
the
because you're like,
thing.
maybe it's just different
Because
than
it's
me.
like the biggest fear, like the first time I ever started talking about when I was like, I think I have PTSD from when I was 14. Like I was like, it took me years to get to that point. And then it was me working with a therapist who like, I hadn't told anybody about it. And then she like basically wrote like this diagnosis via email. And I just like forwarded it to my family because I was like, see, it's not like I'm not making it up. And then it's like, but I like didn't know how else to go about it other than forwarding an email to my family. My dad was like in the basement and like came upstairs and was like, ow. But I was like, yeah, I've just been sitting on this. But it's like, it's so hard because you don't want to be questioned because then you feel like you're going crazy. And then it's like, nothing's been like, I had a friend, like I've said it earlier in this episode, like had friends realize through me going through not even just like when I was 14, but other experiences, being drugged, like all this other stuff happening, other friends coming to me and being like, you helped me realize that. And in a way, it's a very like validating thing of me being like, holy shit, like I guess through my pain, I can help other people and I can be there for them. So it's like, who am I to turn around and question someone? Because like, I'm so thankful that so many people didn't question me. Like, it's so hard.
Well, and I think it's just that of like the idea of like who is the burden of proof on? Because I think the way I interpret like the spirit of believing women is not saying that like no woman is ever going to tell a lie, but rather that instead of where we had it certainly before Me Too, and I think arguably still now, where there's this slant of like it is such an uphill battle to prove this trauma, even though, and I think like, you know, we say women, it's anybody who's a survivor of it, but I think especially in like all female spaces I've been in, there's this like difference of like, oh, we all understand. Like we know just how common this is. We have like, it's happened to us, it's happened to our friends. And so there's this level of like acceptance. And I think the idea is when we say believe women is that we want to have, not to say that like you will never, ever, ever lie or that you will never be wrong, but just that we're going to start from a place of like acceptance and believing you and like validating your experience. And like, I've been hoping that I just like that sort of means with that interpretation, even if Amber Heard is lying about this stuff, it doesn't.
Hopefully it doesn't set a precedent
else.
for
Right.
not
Yeah.
believing. Yeah.
Well,
because she has gone through traumatic things from her prior life and from Johnny. He's done and said terrible things to her, and that does deserve empathy and sympathy for her. And I just wish that it wasn't everything that is true isn't being called a lie because there's so many other things that she could possibly be lying about.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, it's like a weird thing where it's like you don't want to throw out everything because there clearly are, like clearly she's dealing, like you said, with trauma. So it's like, how do you pick and choose? It's a hard thing.
Yeah, it's tough. But like, I guess to your point too, I think we want to and should, and also to Amanda's point, like when we hear anyone talk about them being victimized, whether it's women, whether it's men, I think we have to want to receive that with an open mind and want to give them the benefit of the doubt and hear them and listen and really make them feel like they're heard. Because I think that's the thing. In the past, I think we were always so quick to dismiss people. Oh, they're exaggerating. Oh, I don't know if that happened. Oh, what's the other side? You know, and I think all victims have felt that way. And so like maybe the hope is with this trial, we're just having, despite, you know, wondering if Amber Heard telling the truth, and overall better empathy for all victims and just a willingness to like the nuances. And when we listen to Dr. Kirk talk about like, you know, of experiencing trauma and how we can affect and how in a relationship we can continue to hurt each other's partners unwillingly. And we are, you know, it's just like, there's just a lot to digest here. So thank you for sharing your stories. I know that's not always easy. It's just tough. Just lots to unpack and lots to talk about.
And it requires so much nuance. And I think there's a desire to feel like we can reach a conclusion together, that there's some way to make sense of this, because it's been batshit and it's been overwhelming and it's started so many different conversations. And I think for me personally, like I want to get to a point where I'm like, yes, this is what is going on. Like, I want to find a reality that feels tangible. And it just seems like because of all the nuance that's involved, like that's not maybe a realistic expectation in unpacking this.
I don't think it is. I think all we can really do is try to like discuss the nuance and then have some helpful takeaways, because you're right. Like, I don't think people are going to decide who they want to believe, but I don't think there's ever going to be a clear answer.
And I think that's a real problem with like this team Johnny rhetoric, where there's like many ways that I've empathized with Johnny Depp and felt a lot of, I guess, not loyalty, but like empathized with him. But I think changing it into like a team thing makes it seem like it makes it win-loss, like black and white, instead of this like both and nuanced situation that it actually is.
Yeah. Well, what a rich episode of a lot of information. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Tomorrow, we have a very fun episode with the wonderful Erica Purcell. You might know her from TikTok. Her fiance Scott, not yet her husband. We became best friends at Coachella. They are in town, and we are going to have a ton of fun with them tomorrow and going deeper. We have office hours, texting office hours. So tune in tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, rate, review. Natalie, I love you. Thanks for coming on.
Love you.
Thanks for sharing your story.
Love you.
Love
you guys.
Love you.
Love you, Natalie.
Love everyone. Love you.
Love you. And thank you to Janine and Dr. Kirk as well. And be sure to follow them, subscribe. Am I missing anything? See you tomorrow. Hey guys, thanks for watching. But before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss any future videos, like our Mondays Ask Nick, especially if you're looking for some relationship stories and relationship advice, as well as our Wednesday interviews with your favorite celebrities and experts. See you next time.